I assume if you're here, especially if you've been coming for any period of time, that there is something here that has caught your attention. There's something here that has attracted your interest. And I think it's important to take the time, if I were you, to look and see what that is. What is it that really is the attraction here? And who is it that is attracted? I was listening to, I sent out on the email list, I sent a couple of links out. One was to a Lama whose name I can't pronounce. Some of these guys got names, forget about it, right? But he's considered a pretty well-known Lama in one of the Buddhist traditions. And the reason I sent the link out, he was being interviewed on an Asian television station, and it was an interesting interview because one of the things about this guy that caught my attention was that he wasn't your regular soft-spoken, spiritual person. He seemed like a regular guy. He spoke a lot more pedestrian. He spoke a lot more irreverent when it came to the typical spiritual ideas. He made comments that indicated that he didn't see any point in holding any particular teaching or practice or belief as anything special. In fact, I listened to another one of his lectures, and he, in many of his talks, he talks about the fact that a lot of what is spoken of in these teachings in Buddhism, for example, and a lot of the things that the Buddha is quoted had said, he called Cinderella talk. He called it Cinderella talk. Or in this particular interview, he actually references to the same thing, and he calls it that these things that were spoken of by the Buddha or by other spiritual teachers that were considered teddy bears or toys for children. It's a very interesting thing to consider, right? And what he was talking about is the fact that many of the things that are said in these teachings are said not because they're true, but because most of the people who are listening couldn't understand the truth, right? And so what is being said is something that you can understand that will at least give you a general idea, kind of put you in the direction of it, right? And this is one of the reasons why Jesus Christ spoke in parables. And this is one of the reasons why stories are so popular in terms of the way teachers teach. And so he said that it's important to understand this in terms of one of the teachers that I'm familiar with and we talk about here a lot in terms of Rupert Spira's teachings. He calls these things concessions. Concessions. In other words, they're not really true, right? But they can kind of give you an idea that's in the direction of what's true. For example, he talks, one of the things that he speaks about it in terms of a concession is he says that one way to talk about awareness or consciousness is to say it's like the screen the movie's playing on, right? So there's the content, which is the movie, and the screen, which is consciousness, right? But that's not really true. That's not true. He's saying that to kind of give you a step in the direction of understanding this, because the next thing that he speaks of is that it's more like, or actually what it is that there's no screen and movie, it's one thing. It's non-dual, right? There's no screen and movie, it's one thing. Consciousness is one thing. And there's nothing in this one thing that is actually separate from itself. What appears to be happening is itself modulating. He talks about modulation. It's itself modulating. It's itself moving as itself. And when he talks about these things, he's really getting closer to pointing to the actuality of consciousness and pointing to the idea of non-duality and pointing to the idea that this is all there is. This non-duality is the truth. Non-duality is the truth. And so this other Lama was talking about the same kinds of things, and he said a lot of the things that the Buddha said, you know, the Eight Noble Truths and the path to liberation, and, you know, the path to liberation, that's all kind of a story to kind of, you know, draw you in to get you interested in the possibility, because what's being offered here is liberation, right? Liberation. And what liberation is defined as in Buddhism is nirvana, the end of suffering is liberation, right? In which it's possible to really be free and at ease and enjoy your life, etc., etc. However, if that's actually not the truth, then what's the truth? Well, the truth, and this Lama says that there are other times when the Buddha does say things, the way he says that there are times when the Buddha says things that he means, where these other things that he says, he doesn't really mean that, he's just saying that for the sake of the listener. But when he gets to the truth, he doesn't say that there's a path to the truth, or he doesn't say that the goal is liberation, or the goal is the end of, or nirvana, the end of suffering. What he then says is there's no such thing as suffering. See, that's getting closer to the truth. There's no such thing as suffering. There's no such thing as freedom, because there was never any bondage. That your actual nature, can't even use the word freedom, because freedom would indicate that there's something other than that, but that's not the case. So when you get closer to the truth, you're talking about things as they are, just as they are. There's nothing going to change. Nothing has to change. Nothing has to be different. Right? And this is one of the things about these teachings and practices, is that when they're spoken, when people listen to them, the place that people listen from can't hear the truth. If you've been here for a while, you may have begun to notice that there were things that I have said in the past, or things that you've read or heard other people say in the past, that at that time in the past they meant nothing to you. You didn't understand them at all. It was gobbledygook. And now you may notice, if you've been coming for a while and you've been giving this attention and you've been meditating, that some of those things have cleared up. You know, that you can now see things that before made no sense to you, right? It's often interesting to me when people read, especially the last book that I wrote, the Dying to Live, that I get people, very intelligent people. This has nothing to do with intelligence. In fact, sometimes intelligence can be the thing that's the problem, that's in the way of seeing the truth, right? But I have had people who've read or tried to read that book and came back and said to me, I have no idea what that's talking about. No idea. I gave a copy to my urologist, right? A medical doctor, right? I mean, you know, intelligent man, right? And he said, I'll try to read it again if you think it'll help. Right? But that's the way that truth lands. And you know, the thing about this that's important to understand is it doesn't mean he's stupid, right? It doesn't mean he's bad, right? It just means that there is a veil, there is the way that we're conditioned, the way the brain, the mind thinks, is so radically different from the truth that you can hear the truth and it makes no sense. It makes no sense. The important thing about this is it doesn't matter where you are in the process. What matters is that you're listening and you're looking and you're not being stopped by confusion. You're listening and you're looking and you're not being stopped by confusion. The things that I'm most interested in are the things that I read that make no sense to me. Make no sense to me. One teacher that I've studied for many decades at one point made a statement about creativity. And he said creativity, he defined creativity, and he said that creativity was a matter of distinction. Creation is a matter of distinction. I had no idea what he was talking about. No clue at all. It took years for me to see what he was pointing to. But the only way I was going to see what he was pointing to was I had to stay with it. I had to keep looking. I didn't walk away from it. I didn't make it wrong, right? You know, when people listen to a lot of these teachings, they say, "Oh, you're confusing me. You're confusing me." It's like an offense, right? Rather than seeing that confusion simply means that you don't yet recognize what's being said. That's all. Don't recognize what's being said. If somebody's learning math, right, and you have a kid in grade school that's learning the times tables, and you present them with algebra or trigonometry, it makes no sense to them, right? So it's important to understand that part of what this is about is to, having understood what's possible, having recognized the possibility, having recognized the truth like a possibility, even if it's just a conceptual understanding. If you stay tuned in, if you practice, if you learn to pay attention so that you stop just identifying with the mind and with thinking, it will start to reveal itself to you. It'll reveal itself to you. You'll find yourself in situations in life in which patterns begin to run, right? And in the past, that wasn't a pattern. That was actually what you were seeing happening, which is the way most people are experiencing everything, right? You'll find yourself in a situation where a pattern will start to run, an emotion will arise, a thought process will occur, and prior to this particular moment, that was just the way it was. You were just seeing the way it was. And you might get angry and you might behave in an offensive way or a defensive way. And all of a sudden, the lights go on and you see, oh no, that's not the way it is. That's just the thoughts that are happening. Oh no, that's not what's actually happening out there. There are just the feelings that have arisen. That is a very enlightening moment, right? Where you begin to see things as they are. And when that happens and you don't follow the pattern in that particular situation, you experience a kind of freedom you didn't know before. You didn't say the thing that would have caused things to go the way they always go. This is so true in your relationships, right? You don't say the thing or do the thing that's going to cause things to go the way they always go. And then you realize, wow, if that's the case, and if that's the case about the way I'm identified with thoughts and feelings and perceptions, because remember, perceptions are not reality. Perceptions are an interpretation of reality. So if that's the way it's going all the time in terms of my confusing what I think with the way it is, or how I feel with the way it is, or the perception I'm having with the way it is, what's really going on? This is an important place to get to in your life, because then you realize the application of awareness, right? You realize that awareness can open up a whole new realm of possibility, can allow you to actually come into contact with life, maybe for the first time since you were a baby. Maybe there were other times since you were a baby where you've had a glimpse, right? A taste. I know some of you have, because you've talked about it, right? You had a glimpse, right? And what you had when you had a glimpse was, for whatever reason, there was a break in the way thinking and feeling and perceptions were creating what you were seeing and experiencing. For whatever reason, there was a break. And when that break occurred, you saw things as they actually are. And the way that's expressed by people is they say it was such a relief. It felt so clear, so easy, so obvious. And then it shuts down. And then of course, when it shuts down, it's because the thought arises, oh wow, man, this is really cool. And then you're back into the personality, you see. So, one of the things this Lama said that caught my attention is he said, in Buddhism, and I've said this before in class, it's so good to hear somebody that's got recognition as a Lama, repeat the same things that I've seen for myself, right? And I hope that as you guys continue in these practices and teachings that happens for you, that you see things for yourself. You know, things that maybe nobody has said, but after you see them for yourself and then you read it in a book somewhere and it validates the fact that you're seeing reality, right? So this guy said, you know, in Buddhism, Buddhists are really not concerned about stress. They think it's interesting, but they're really not concerned about stress. And the way meditation has been packaged and sold in the West as stress reduction, right? But the Buddhists think that is an insult. They think it's an insult that meditation be sold as stress reduction. Because the purpose of meditation in its true inception was as a way of seeing the truth. Not for stress reduction, for seeing the truth. As a way of seeing who you are. A way of seeing things as they are. And when you see the truth of yourself and you see things as they are, there's no stress. So in other words, what the Buddhists are saying is, why talk about meditation for stress reduction when the source of the stress is the confusion you're living your life in instead of seeing things as they are, instead of seeing who you really are. And meditation can be a powerful tool to see that. That's why at one point I was watching a meeting that the Buddha was having with physicists and psychologists, and this one woman was showing him a program that she devised to use meditation to reduce craving for addicts, you know, so that they could survive periods when they had craving, right? And she showed him the program, and she showed him the research that they had done, and it showed that the people that have been in the program, you know, had been able to stay sober longer. And he listened, and after she got done, she said, "Well, Your Holiness, what do you think?" And he said, he shook his head, and he made a negative comment. And everybody that was in the meeting, was taken back, you know, he wasn't impressed by the use of meditation to help these addicts, you know. And he noticed that, and then he explained himself, and he said, "Why are you teaching meditation to these people who are suffering from addictions that end up killing them, when you could use meditation to teach them who they are, and that will be an end to the problem? To let them discover the truth of who they are." This is the thing when I was working in the prison system, and I brought meditation teachers in. I actually brought a meditation teacher in from Philadelphia to the prison who was the assistant to the Dalai Lama. And he had moved to Philadelphia, and so he actually had been to India and visited the Dalai Lama. He had a personal relationship with the Dalai Lama, and he brought me back a robe because he said I was a Lama, so he gave me a robe. But he would come and teach meditation to the inmates, but we were really clear that I wasn't interested in the inmates using meditation for stress reduction. I was using it along with the education they were getting about the truth and about who they were. And there were guys that were involved in that programming that literally woke up and saw reality for what it is, and were walking around in the prison freer and without as much stress as people walking around on the street. And it wasn't fake. It wasn't something that was a passing thing. You know, the guys who were able to get it far enough into this where they woke up and saw things where they were, it stayed with them. The ones that had addictions, the addictions disappeared. We followed them up after they got out of prison, and they stayed out of prison and stayed off drugs. So these things work. They work. And I say all this for two reasons: to acknowledge you, whether it's you who's sitting here in person or the people who look at the videos and are practicing meditation and involved in these teachings. I say this to encourage you to stay tuned in, to keep giving this your attention, to keep maintaining a commitment to reality and to the truth. It will pay off. You're putting your money in the right bank. you're putting your money in the right bank, because this bank pays great dividends. Great dividends.